What is up, guys? Thank you to a lot of people actually for making me the new graphics here. You can check the description below on YouTube to go and support them. It's actually really awesome to be able to have these graphics here. And anyways, this is going to be kind of a normal show now. It seemed I got enough interest with the In Control episode to go ahead and do it. So today on the show, we actually have another Team Evil Geniuses member. It is none other than Greg.IdrA Fields. Greg, first off, I love your hair, Greg.
Thank you. It is glorious.
It is quite glorious. That was then, and this is now. What was going on with that hair, Greg?
I played a lot of Starcraft, and I was really lazy. You know, time for a haircut. That's not high on the list of priorities. So
Makes sense.
that happened.
That happened. Now, let's talk about one thing before we really jump to the yesteryears, if you were. Yesterday on Reddit, it is actually May 23rd. If you're watching this a little bit later than that, Naniwa called you out asking you about a show match, and you basically responded to him in a pretty harsh way. What was up with that tweet, man? What pissed you off so much about Naniwa's kind of I guess provoking tweet?
Well, he's kind of just a terrible person. Like, this whole little incident started with him saying it was too bad NASL wouldn't let him play me in a show match or something, implying that, like, he requested me and I dodged, or they wouldn't let him for whatever reason. But NASL show matches are set up by them. Like, I didn't get to choose Moro didn't get to choose me. If anything, Naniwa was just like, okay, I'll do it, but only if you let me play EG.IdrA. And they're like, no, that's not how it works. And then he goes and posts on the forum, and, you know, that makes it look like he's trying to get me and I'm dodging him or whatever, so I found that kind of insulting. And so I replied something about his PvZ being shit. He challenged me to a show match, and we agreed to do that. But since then, I've had some other stuff going on, and there's lots of tournaments right now. I don't have any time, and I don't want to play it. And he keeps tweeting over and over. And at first I just ignored it, let him have his fun, because I did agree to it, and I'm not going to right now. Then he keeps going. And then that's just kind of like the final straw. Naniwa is actually a terrible person. Anyone in the industry will tell you. Quantic is looking to get rid of him, and as soon as they manage to, he is going to be done in eSports or not making the kind of money that he thinks he should, because he has burned so many bridges. Like, there's so many anecdotes. First time I ever met him, me, Artosis Cloud, and the MYM manager were sitting in a hotel room, and he, like, walks up, and Artosis is, like, in a stage whisper, obviously kidding around. Oh, hey, there's Naniwa, close the door quick. So he stalks off, goes upstairs, and then refuses to shake any of our hands, including the MYM manager, and he was on MYM at that time. That was the first time he met him. Then his girlfriend was with him at an event a little while ago, and he told her she had to stay in the hotel. She wasn't allowed to come to the event. Got pissed off at her when she came. And then, see, MLG Providence, he should have been disqualified because he was watching replay between the games after he fucked Nesty over with the whole bathroom break thing. And then that allowed him to win because he knew Nestie's scouting patterns and what build he was trying to do. So, you know, these stories goes on and on and on. You can ask anyone who's willing to talk about it in the industry, and they will say they fucking despise it. So, he needs to learn to shut the fuck up.
Well, two things just happened. One, you got me all the views that I could ever want with that statement. Two, for those of you who don't know much about Greg.IdrA Fields, he basically just kind of told you a little bit about him. He's a very blunt guy, and that's why a lot of people in the community love him for that. So, let's just kind of slow things down there after I'm sure a lot of people are going to be going crazy right now hearing your thoughts on
We can actually
Naniwa.
just end the show now. I think that
You want to just end it right now? that's it, guys. Real talk. That's all Greg has. No. Greg, what's your full name? Everyone knows you as Greg Fields. Do you have a middle name?
Gregory Andrew Fields.
Andrew. All right. Now, what about your childhood, man? Where'd you grow up? What did your parents do for work? And just generally, did you have a fun childhood, man? Did you enjoy it?
It was an interesting childhood. My parents are both organic chemists. My mom retired when she had me to raise kids, and my dad is now like regulatory director or whatever for Pfizer. He writes the documents that they send the FDA to justify their drugs. I grew up in Kalamazoo, Michigan. It was kind of interesting. I was actually one of like 4 white kids in my grade. It was mostly a really ghetto, like low-income area, but then they bust just a handful of us in to meet diversity requirements or whatever. So I had a really weird childhood once it got to the point where people realized the difference between, you know, the handful of us who were like white middle class and then everyone else living together. There were bullet holes in the windows of our school, stuff like that. So interesting childhood, but overall pretty normal. Like I did well in school. Nothing really stand out.
What was your best subject in school, if you had one? What did you really enjoy, and what did you hate?
I was a math and science nerd. I didn't like creative writing. I enjoyed reading, and I was a pretty good writer. I hated creative writing, though. I'm just not a very creative person in general. But yeah, math and science, definitely a nerd.
So, I mean, math and science, basically a nerd. Is that kind of the group that you hung out with, or did you play any sports in high school or anything like that?
I ran track in middle school and I think freshman year of high school, but I was not like a jock or a track runner or anything. I just did it. I was actually kind of chubby in middle school. I had completely forgotten that, and then I looked at some pictures when I went back home a little while ago. So I think I'm just going to go ahead and assume that I got into track because I wanted to clean that up. I was reasonably good, and then I realized that running is pretty boring, and I moved on. But when I was really, really young, I played lots of sports outside of school: baseball, soccer, tennis. I was really, really into golf for a summer. Like, I could see myself getting back into golf whenever I had more time. I really, really like that.
Really?
Yeah, but baseball was my best sport. I was a really good catcher, relatively speaking. This was when I was like 12, 13. So I played lots of sports. I was really, really competitive. And that's actually when I ended up transitioning into Starcraft. I've talked about this in public quite a bit, but I'm not a gamer at all. Like, I don't play any other games. I just really like Starcraft because that was a competition that really happened to fit my skill set. I'm not super athletic, but I'm really coordinated. And, you know, I have a proper skill set for a competitive game, a competitive RTS. So all that competition kind of funneled into StarCraft.
Well, before we kind of jump onto the StarCraft tangent, I want to stay on this for a little while longer. A lot of people probably know the answer to this, but for those of you who don't, did you go to college, Greg? I know that you went to Korea pretty early on, or somewhere 15, 16. When did you actually end up going to South Korea to play Brood War competitively?
When I was 18, I actually left halfway through my senior year of high school, got a GED, never ended up going to college.
Gotcha. Do you regret that at all? Do you wish that you could go back and tell a younger Mr. Fields that, well, you should probably go to school, or are you quite happy with how things kind of worked out?
Well, I'm very happy with how things worked out. However, it was a terrible decision at the time. Like, if StarCraft 2 hadn't happened, and I hadn't been as successful at it as I was, and also, you know, the whole personality turned me into kind of a superstar, almost regardless of results. The results had to be there, but there are people who are as good or better than me not making enough money to really sustain themselves. Right. So it just a whole bunch of things lined up to put me in a really good place, and there was no guarantee that that would happen that way. I took a really, really big risk, and it happened to turn out well for me, so I'm happy about that, and I'm happy with my life. I wouldn't go back and change it given this course of things. But anyone who's in school and considering dropping out, if you're not already winning tournaments, like if you're not Stefano, or that kind of situation, stay in school. You can be good enough to compete with foreigners, you know, in your free time, at least up until college.
What did your parents think about that decision of you going over to Korea? Were they for it? Did they support you?
My mom was really nervous about it at first. Obviously, you know, your kid going off to South Korea, which is a really foreign country, like complete language barrier, very, very different than the U.S., not like going to Canada or England or Western Europe or anything like that. So your kid doing that at 18, that's going to make any mom nervous. But she realized it was what I really wanted to do, and I was really set on it. And I had a pretty reasonable path to make it happen. Like, I had a team house. I had people who were going to take care of me. I wasn't just going to be over there on my own. So she kind of accepted it, and she has become very, very supportive of me. She stays up, when I'm in Korea, she stays up to watch my tournaments at like 4 or 5 in the morning. Wow. And she follows all my results. She helps me out with financial and business side of my career. So she's as supportive as she can possibly be. And my dad is kind of, you know, he was not supportive of it at all. He's super, super conservative. Anything but go off to college, get a job, and then retire and die is not acceptable. So he was just absolutely against it at first. Now that I'm kind of, I'm making a legitimate career of it, I'm doing well for myself, he is better, but he would still definitely prefer I just had a conventional job.
Have they ever been to a tournament to watch you play in person before, while we're on that topic?
No, they haven't.
Is that something that they want to do? Have you talked to them about it before?
My mom is kind of on the fence. She'd kind of like to. She's not entirely sure. Like, if she happened to be connected to me, the mom of EG.IdrA, if she's obviously she knows about the community. She reads Team Liquid. She's not sure if that's something she wants the public spotlight or anything. My dad has no interest.
Yeah.
But yeah, They live in New Jersey right now, and IPL3 was in Atlantic City, so she was considering coming to watch that. Ended up not.
Gotcha. Well, before we kind of, we're going to spend a lot of time, obviously, of you being over in Korea for the Brood War days. But before we do you remember the first time you ever played StarCraft Brood War, or StarCraft 1, I should say? And what was that moment like for you?
I vaguely remember the game. I was playing Terran versus a random Zerg opponent on the ladder or in a public game or something, and lurkers were killing my base, and I lifted off my buildings. I remember a screenshot.
Oh, so you started with Brood War. Sorry to interrupt, but you said lurkers, so you started with Brood War. You didn't play StarCraft Vanilla?
Yeah, the first time I got the game, it was the battle chest, so it was after Brood War came out. Yeah.
Ooh, even the battle. When did the battle chest come out? That was like.
I have no idea.
But yeah, I thought you started out in Vanilla, man.
I started out when I was in 6th grade, so I was 12. So that was like 10 years ago.
How old are you now?
22.
Okay. Yeah, because I remember. I guess I started around the same age as you, but it was Vanilla, and then Brood War came out. It changed, whatever. But
at that point. At that point, I wasn't even aware there was a Vanilla and a Brood War. I didn't know anything about it. All my friend was just like, "This is a really cool game. You should play it." So I got Battle Chest and I started playing.
Back then, computers were kind of, at least gaming computers were kind of a rarity. Did your parents have to buy you a PC, or did you happen to have one in the house?
I had a computer. They never allowed me to have any consoles, so they allowed me to have a computer that was good enough to run some games. And it was good enough for Brood War, so no, we didn't have to but we fought over whether or not I was going to be allowed on the internet, because I was 12 and they were super protective, so they're like, there's bad people out there, I don't know if we're really comfortable with this. That was an ongoing debate.
Interesting. Well, let's talk about your Brood War time over in South Korea. When did you first learn about it? How old were you? And were you excited? Were you scared? What were your initial thoughts when you were going to be basically living in South Korea playing Brood War competitively?
I think I found out about pro gaming when I was like 14 or 15, I guess. I played very, very casually until then. And I found out that existed and it was possible to actually do it really seriously and kind of, make a living off of it. So then I started practicing a lot more. And everything just kind of snowballed. I started getting better and better, getting into better teams, practicing with better players. Just kind of the regular progression from a casual but serious player into a real competitive player. When I found out I was going to Korea just a couple of months before I actually left, it was like November, December that year, then I moved out in April. Sorry, what was the rest of the question?
How did it happen? I mean, who helped you along with that process? I mean, because it is a process. You can't simply just say, I'm going to go to Korea and play Brood War. There had to have been people that helped you along with it.
You actually just had one of them on the show. It was Hwani. He was the person who picked me up at the airport when I landed in Korea the first time. So, I've known him for a long time. But EG.IdrA, one of the Korean professional teams, hosted a tournament for North American players. And it had a small cash prize, but the first place prize also included a trip to Korea to live in the team house and play with EG.IdrA. And I won that tournament. And they selected me. They could select any of the players, actually, but I won the tournament, and then they selected me. They thought I had the most potential. And they brought me over there. And, yeah, that's how it happened.
What was it like over there? I mean, coming from America, going over to South Korea, it's got to be a culture shock just right off the airplane, but in terms of practice regiment, playing, how crazy Brood War was over there those days, I mean... for those of you not aware, the players, when they were playing, were actually wearing spacesuits a lot of times. They looked like Power Rangers.
That was before my time, but yeah.
Well, before his time even. It's a different mentality over there for sure. What was it like for you when you first were kind of introduced to that in person?
It wasn't actually as weird as you would expect, because I went over there and you literally play StarCraft all day. You're not allowed to go out on days when you have practice unless it's like down to a corner store to get a drink or something. And then you have maybe 1 or 2 days a month off on average. So I wasn't actually going out and experiencing Korea on the whole a ton. I was sitting there and playing StarCraft. But that being said, obviously there's almost an absolute language barrier. And even when the Koreans do speak a good amount of English, they're very shy about it. They think they sound dumb. So the biggest hurdle is actually getting them comfortable enough to speak English to you. So there's that. There's Korean food, which I really liked. And most foreigners who go over do. It's it's delicious. So that wasn't any problem. And I had a very good work ethic. So dealing with the practice regime was really easy for me. I had no problem playing 10, 12 hours a day. And at first we actually only practiced 8, but we weren't doing very well, so they upped it to 10 pretty shortly after I got there. But yeah, I was able to just sit there and practice all day. When they interviewed the coaches who worked with me while I was over there, they always commented on that, just like how I was able to practice along with the rest of the Koreans, and how they were really shocked about that, because they think foreigners are weaker than them.
What was it like when you first met Nick and Dan? I know that whenever I bring it up, or whenever they refer to you, it's always kind of as a young brother, in a sense that they basically made you the EG.IdrA now that you are today. What was it like meeting them for the first time, and what's that relationship like between the two of you, or the three of you?
We're all really old friends. Me and Artosis were close back since the founding of Media. Him and Skew, that was the foreign team I was on for like the last 4 or 5 years of my Brood War career. I stayed on even when I was with EG.IdrA because it wasn't like a professional team. But Artosis and Skew made it. Skew and I were pretty good friends. He was like, we should have this site join. That's pretty much when I met Artosis. And then all of us practiced together pretty much every night while I was still in the U.S. We would all hop on a vent channel with a bunch of other American players, and we practiced until me or Artosis or Skew got pissed and left, or G5. That was the angriest vent channel ever. I've told stories about it before. Like, we all despised each other, but it was really fun. So yeah, I've known Artosis forever as a gamer. I met him at a couple of LANs in the U.S. before, Tasteless as well. The first time I met Artosis was actually at the LAN that picture of me with long hair that you posted was taken at. That was just some random LAN up in the Northeast. Thank you. You needed that.
Hey, you mentioned it. You gave me the opportunity.
Yeah.
I'm going to take
so
it.
I met Dan up there. And at that point, we were just pretty good, internet friends who practiced together a lot. And Tasteless was kind of the same, but not as close because we didn't play together as much. We didn't talk as much. Met him for the first time at MLG, or not MLG, WCG 07 in Orlando, perhaps. We just hung out, talked a bunch. But then once we were all over in Korea, because for a while it was just the three of us for foreigners in eSports, so we hung out together whenever I had time off. And yeah, I was a really quiet, little socially awkward nerd at that point. I just played Starcraft. I didn't go out. I didn't talk to people. I didn't do anything. So they kind of broke me out of that, made me a little sociable creature.
They made you a man.
Yes, they did. So yeah, the little brother thing you mentioned before, that's reasonably accurate.
All right.
That's a description of our relationship.
So one of the other unique things that you've had kind of the privilege to do, except I guess the only other people to really do it would be Rhett. Rhett's the only other foreigner that's ever lived in a team house in Korea for both StarCraft and StarCraft 2, correct? Is there anyone else?
Yeah, that's true. It's only me and Rhett, yeah.
So what was it like then comparing to now? You spent some time in the Slayer's house, I think the most. What are the big differences? Are the schedules the same? You like it better? You like it worse? What are your thoughts?
I like my time with Slayers much more, but it is much more relaxed now. In StarCraft 1, like I said, 10, 12 hours a day, literally, no exaggeration. Scheduled 10 or 12 hours a day, and most of them would then practice more. I get like 5, 6 hours of sleep a night. And you weren't allowed to like go on the internet or alt-tab or whatever during practice. It was, you were playing a game, you were watching a replay, or you were watching a VOD. And that was it. But in StarCraft 2, in the Slayer's house, you're allowed to like mess around a bit between games. If you're kind of stressed out, if you're on a losing streak or whatever, you can go browse the internet for a while, just distract yourself. I think we only had like 8 or 9 hours scheduled practice. I forget the exact schedule. Everyone went over anyway, but it is quite a bit more relaxed. And I enjoyed with Slayers much more, really just because the team was a lot nicer, a lot friendlier. The StarCraft 1 guys, very serious, very focused. Also very shy. A lot of them were a lot younger, so that might contribute to it. And the industry was just much more cutthroat. There was much more competition for spots. Everything was just at a much higher level because it had been around for longer and everyone worked a bit harder at it. So everyone was very serious and focused. And also at that time I was, like I said, much less sociable. I was more awkward as well. So most of the time I didn't really interact with them too much. Everyone just sat there practicing. The Slayers guys, on the other hand, were very, very open and friendly. Some of them even started taking English classes once they formed the partnership because they knew they were going to be living with a lot of foreigners. They wanted to be able to talk with us more, interact with us more. I remember MMA, after he went off to, I think it was IEM Kiev, he was talking about how ridiculously difficult it was for him being in a country where no one spoke his language, and how that made him feel like really sorry for me, and he was going to go off and learn English so he could help me out. They're just all really awesome guys.
Was there anyone in that I guess the two houses? You were in two different ones, right? When you were in Brood War?
EG.IdrA and CJ, yeah.
Was there anyone at those houses that kind of took you under their wing, or that you had more of a friendship with than everyone else in the house?
I was never super close to anyone personally. There was one guy in CJ, Byung-Cal, we like joined at the same time, and we were both Terran. So he would help me out. He would point things out, give me a lot of advice when he could. He was really young and had relatively decent English. Like they would give me advice when they could, but they were mostly very shy, and they had pretty poor English for the most part. They just felt awkward approaching me, and I wasn't sure how to communicate what I wanted from them either. So. Everyone got along well enough. It wasn't a very personal relationship.
The coaches for Brood War, I don't know if stricter or more strict is the...
Stricter is, yeah.
Is that the correct term you would use?
They were definitely much more strict.
Is that something you prefer compared to like your time in the Slayer's house or even the Evil Genius's house where you guys kind of manage yourselves at the moment?
I'm pretty well self-motivated. I don't need someone breathing down my neck to make me practice, so it doesn't bother me too much. Although for the 12-hour practice schedule, I think it was nice to have someone, it was nice to know that I would get in trouble if I didn't work hard enough. That was just like a little extra motivation. I personally don't mind the Starcraft 1 style, super strict, very rigorous. I don't mind that at all, but I think a lot of foreigners would, and I'm not sure if it's really the best way. I think they might overdo it. I think it might stress them out too much. You need a little bit more balance in your life, particularly with Starcraft 2, where practice isn't quite as important as it was in Starcraft 1, just because the mechanical difficulty isn't quite there.
Yeah. Well, now you're actually in one of the other first, Brood War house, first off, then Slayer's house, and now you're living in the EG house. What is that experience like, kind of against the other two? Do you like your time there? Do you wish it was more strict? Do you wish you were playing against Koreans? Do you like your practice partners? What are your thoughts on that?
It probably could be a bit more strict. I'm not sure if we really practice enough, but it is a much more relaxed environment. Part of that is we're all friends living together, so it's not quite the same as a purely professional environment like the other team. Well, not purely professional. They are all pretty friendly too, and they all live together, so it's not like a workplace. But it is much more like a workplace than the EG house is. So there's that. I think I would prefer if it was a little bit more strict. And as for practice partners, yeah, I'd rather practice on Korea. But I've come to realize it's kind of good to practice against foreigners too. When you practice against Koreans as Zerg, I think you actually end up playing too timid, too scared if you're not very aware of your own play and of your own tendencies. Just because Koreans are so aggressive and they have such cutthroat builds that it's like there's so many different little things that can kill you. And if you become too conscious of everything that can kill you and you become too afraid of it, then you're not going to win. You can't play StarCraft 2 like that. There's always going to be some risks involved, particularly as Zerg versus those aggressive builds. And if you're not willing to cut some corners and take some risks, you're not really going to win all that much. And playing against foreigners makes me much more comfortable taking those risks because often you can compensate for it with mechanics. Whereas against Koreans, if they hit the counter build, if they hit the thing you're not prepared for, you miss scout or whatever, you're just going to die. So there's some pluses and minuses. Generally, I prefer to be practicing on Korea just because the level's higher.
What about your time over at the GSL? You were in... I'm trying to think back which exact seasons it was, but the early on seasons of GSL were kind of a time that we'll never really see again, where everyone was figuring out the game. The level of play was quite terrible. Foreigners at that time on that stage were kind of unheard of just across the board. What was it like for you playing in a stage like that and almost being, in a sense, what you aspire to be in Brood War? A little bit easier, I got to say, in StarCraft 2. What was it like for you then, playing at GSL? It
was really, really cool. Also a little bit frustrating. I'll get into why it was frustrating later, but it was really, really cool. I think I was the only foreigner to qualify for all three of the open seasons. and then I think it was either January or February Code S, I ended up getting round to 8, which is second best any foreigner's ever done. EG.IdrA obviously got round to 4 twice. So I performed reasonably well there, and it was a big stage. I was a huge draw for them. I think I played the first GSL match ever, the opening match, against some Terran up on stage at their little opening ceremony. So that was just ridiculously cool. And that video had the highest number of hits, except for like the first season finals, for 3 or 4 seasons. So that's just incredibly cool when, you know, Korean esports is what you were aspiring to for 3 or 4 years as a Brood War player. So that was just amazing. But on the other hand, it was also pretty frustrating because there was a while where I was arguably the best player in the world. Me and Fruit Dealer were tied at about 100 ladder points ahead of everyone else on the Korean ladder, and all anyone did was ladder because the teams weren't formed yet and people weren't practicing privately as much yet. So I was really, really good. And then, you know, playing tournaments back then was really hard for Zerg. You had maps like Steppes of War and Kulas Ravine. You had close positions Metalopolis, and you had bunker blocks at the bottom of your ramp and everything like that. I can't count the number of times I got knocked out of tournaments by some silly little thing when I definitely felt like I was capable of winning the tournament. Like, I think I could have, should have, would have been a contender to win a GSL. I played MVP. It was a season or 2 before his first GSL win, but he was already recognized as pretty much the best player in the world. He had a X-0, like 27 or 30-0 streak against Zerg on ladder. People were hyping him up. I play him, and then I beat him on Steppes of War, which actually shouldn't be possible. Like, Zerg is not supposed to be able to win when
Steppes
tanks
of War,
can
guys.
reach. Yeah,
Steppes
tanks
of
can
War.
like reach your natural from his natural, and I fucking win that game, which is just, looking back, I still have absolutely no idea how that's possible. And then we play the third set, and it's on Metalopolis close positions, and he 2-racks bunkers me. And it's just like, did I really deserve to lose that? Then we go to MLG Dallas, the national championships or whatever, after I won MLG DC, and I have Nazgul, Blink Stalker rush me 3 times. We get close positions middle, and then Kulas Ravine. Yeah. Then I play Select, we get close positions Lost Temple. Old Lost Temple, not Shadow Temple, Lost Temple. And then I beat him on Scrap Station, and then we play on Delta Quadrant, and he does the 2 bunker block below my ramp, and then adds 3 and 4 bunkers behind it. So it's just like, you look back on that, and you look at how well I performed despite all of the problems that Zerg had to face. Like, how many times were there 2 Zergs in the top 8 of GSL? How long were we at 20% win? And looking back, it feels like there were a lot of, I would say, missed opportunities, except they weren't opportunities because Blizzard was just terrible at doing what they were supposed to do, balancing the game, having proper maps, etc. So that's kind of frustrating.
Yeah. I'm sorry that you had to play on those maps, Greg, as a MLG representative, but I guess at the time that's all there was.
There were no competent map makers back then. Like that scene just didn't exist yet. It was on Blizzard
right
to have proper maps.
Yeah. But different time these days, although there are still some terrible map pulls out there, but that's another story, another conversation for another day. Any stories in Korea that you're quite fond of, or any moments that were kind of big moments in your life in your time over there?
Well, playing that first GSL, like the opening match for the league that was clearly going to be the headline league for Starcraft 2, at least up until Kespa switches over. Getting to play that first match up on stage with all of the Blizzard representatives, Mike Moram, I think, was there, all the GSL head honchos, that was a pretty huge moment for Starcraft 2. And I got to play it, and I got to win 2-0 in pretty cool games. Like, one guy went for a Ghost Drop Rush on Desert Oasis or something silly, and I just utterly dominated him. That was really, really cool. Other moments, when I 3-0'd my round of 16 group, you know, it was like Genius, Clyde, and Nada, who were all really, really good players at the time, and Nada was like my idol from Brood War. So to go through that group and to actually 3-0 it, beating Nada close positions on middle, that was another really cool moment. Getting to round 8, play against EG.IdrA, who I was reasonably sure I was going to beat, but then close positions Sakura's close positions middle and Jungle Basin happened. So, but yeah, that was a cool moment.
Just in general, are there any moments that when you're 70 or 80 years old and you look back that you'll kind of always remember fondly, just from your time in esports?
There's a lot of It's been pretty much my entire life for the last 4 or 5 years. Almost all of my closest friends are a part of esports in one way or the other. But really, I don't know. I think those two I named because I'm very, very competitive. Winning is pretty much everything to me, and competing at Brood War and Starcraft 2 is pretty much everything to me. So those, I'm sure there's stuff I'm forgetting. I'm really bad at picking out my favorites and my bests and stuff like that. But those, I'll remember those for quite a while.
So let's talk about Team Evil Geniuses, your current team. When you first got the offer, or the conversation started when you were still on CJ to join Team Evil Geniuses, what was it like for you? Was it something that you were excited about? Were you kind of fearful of leaving a team that you basically wanted to be on for so long in CJ to go for kind of a non-Korean team, basically?
I had already left CJ before starting to talk to EG. I was really, really happy on CJ. I liked them. I had a lot of good times there. They treated me very well, and they supported me very well. But I knew Kespa wasn't really getting on board with StarCraft 2. Well, I didn't know for sure yet. The discussions were still going on, but it didn't look too optimistic. I wanted to be involved in more foreign stuff, and I just wanted more freedom than being attached to Kespa allows for. I don't like Kespa as an organization, and so that also weighed into my decision. So yeah, given all that, and then given that my contract was going to be up pretty soon, I asked to talk to Shano, the English-speaking CJ manager. I forget his exact title. And told him, I wanted to move on, and he was very supportive, very, very accepting of that. So I left them on good terms. And then I started talking to all the different foreign teams, Mouse, Complexity, Liquid, EG. I think those were the big ones. Ended up being pretty much between EG and Liquid, and I just felt like EG was kind of the better business. They were more established. They obviously knew what they were doing because they'd been around for longer, and they had been pretty much as successful as a foreign esports team can be. Liquid, obviously, great reputation within the community. Nowskull's a really great guy. They had lots of cool players on at the time. But on that note, I was also friends with all of the EG StarCraft 2 players since way back in Brood War. Most Machine and Control, Nyokin at the time, LZ Gamer, those were all the guys I was practicing with back in the US before I even went to Korea. So I had a lot of history with the EG players, and I really, really liked the EG management from what I knew of them. So I just went with that. They had very similar offers, so it came out of that.
In terms of just the friendships at EG, who's the best friend, the number one over there, if you can even quantify that?
Yeah, I don't know. Me and Bryce are pretty close because when I came back from Korea initially, I moved into his and Inka's house just outside of Phoenix. So I've lived with him for the longest, and we hang out a lot. We work out a lot together. We're both Zerg players, so we talk about strategy a lot. But I'm really close to most of the people in the house. I don't really feel comfortable picking a favorite.
I forgot to give credit. That was from Godembro over on Reddit, from Exec4500. He wants to know if you could persuade anyone to join Evil Geniuses, and they would do it without any questions. Who would it be?
That's a tough one. Rhett, maybe? Me and Rhett are really, really good friends. We go back a long way. He's actually the guy who kind of discovered me as a competitive foreign Brood War player, got me on my first real team. So we've known each other for a long time. I have a ton of respect for his play and his skill. He'd be really cool to have around, both as a friend as a competitor. I think he's up there.
In terms of your main interest, one of the Reddit guys, Switch Aus or Switch AUS, wants to know, what are your main interests outside of StarCraft? When you're not playing StarCraft, what will you find yourself doing?
I'm hesitant to do anything that really pulls that much time, because esports, it's like a developing industry, and there's a lot of people here who work really, really hard at what they do. And if you want to succeed and make it and be relevant in the industry, I feel like you have to work just as hard as them. So not only am I practicing, as much as I can, I'm also doing shows like these. I'm doing video content for EG. I have to go around to events, a lot of events. I go to more events than I really want to, just because, that's what's required of me. That's what I have to do to represent EG and our sponsors who make all this possible. So, that's an obligation I have to fulfill. And then, just on top of that is all the practice that I have to do to try and stay as good as I possibly can. So I'm hesitant to spend a lot of time on outside things. Like I said, if I had more time, I would go back to playing golf. as much as I could. I really, really enjoyed that. I basically spent a summer doing nothing but that. That's the only time I've ever had a suntan. So that gives you some idea how much. I am white in Arizona, so I golfed enough for one summer to have a suntan. I'll tell you. And other sports. I kind of like to learn some martial art, maybe MMA, maybe jiu-jitsu, whatever. But we're actually not allowed to because of the potential danger to our hands. Just any kind of injury. Yeah. It's not in our contracts or anything, but Alex Garfield has told me and Chris that we're not allowed to do that. That would be an interesting mind. But given that, it's mostly stuff that's less time-consuming. I watch a decent amount of TV, read a lot of books, mostly sci-fi, occasional nonfiction. Try and feel smart. TV shows, Mad Men.
Yeah,
House.
I gotta ask favorites. Let's just go through this. Favorite book, if you have one.
I don't know about favorite book. Favorite authors are probably Robert Heinlein and James Hogan. Just both oldish sci-fi authors who happen to be my dad's favorite, so I read all their books when I was little.
You were going off on TV series there. What's your favorite or favorites?
I don't know about favorite. Mad Men, Game of Thrones. I haven't really gotten into the new Game of Thrones season. I read the books too recently. House, I like quite a bit. Archer. Archer's my favorite TV show, I think. Californication is really, really good.
There you go.
Californication's excellent.
Favorite,
obviously, but those are the big ones.
what else? What else am I forgetting? Oh, favorite movies. That there's no way you can quantify a single one.
Fight
So.
Club. I'm not a big movie watcher. I have a really short attention span. I tend to just get distracted. The Cabin in the Woods was excellent. I really, really enjoyed that. Saw that recently, so that's fresh in my mind.
Gotcha.
That was great.
Let's go back to kind of. I guess you stated that I'm trying to figure out the best way to phrase this. A lot of people obviously know that one of the biggest problems is not your play or anything like that, but just your ability to kind of stay calm and collected in some of the big, intense match moments. And most recently, you've actually stated that you have started seeing a sports psychologist. How is that? What's it like? How did that really happen? Was it something you were willingly wanting to do?
Yeah, I've only had one session with her so far, so not a whole lot has actually happened yet from it. But it's definitely something I was on board with. We discussed it all the way back in fall, before I had that run of success, IEM China and then on. So I guess we kind of figured maybe the problem fixed itself. I looked into some sports psychology stuff on my own, read a few books, talked to people. And so that was kind of put on back burner. And then I came back from Korea. It was obviously still a problem. Like my mentality, mindset, competitive mindset, those have always been the biggest things holding me back since I became a good player. So it was definitely something I was on board with, something I know I need to work on and fix. And obviously I wasn't able to do it just by myself. So yeah, and EG found her for me. She works with the National Olympic Committee. So just big time legit sports psychologist.
Yeah. Has she stated kind of, or have you stated with her what the goals kind of are for you going in and out of the different sessions?
I think dealing with focusing and positivity are the biggest things for me. I tend to get really down on myself, get tilted, get depressed, whatnot, and that has a massive, anyone can tell you that'll have a massive impact on your play. But yeah, I tend to be too emotional about that. And then also focusing. As odd as it sounds, I get very easily distracted in tournament games. It's very hard for me to keep my mind in it. I start thinking about other stuff that's not particularly relevant when all you can focus on is the game and what's going to happen, what you want to happen, what you think your opponent's going to do.
Is there, do you plan on like blogging, or are you going to be pretty open about the whole process of this to anyone that basically wants to know?
Not particularly. I don't know. I'm not really a blogger. I don't have a blog. I write articles once in a while.
Right.
And I'll do more of that actually once the new EG website goes up. But that's more going to be gameplay and current event focus. Not so much about me. I don't really like writing about myself or anything that's more personal about myself. Don't like putting that out there too much. I'll answer questions about it in whatever way I feel comfortable when they're put to me. But it's not something I'm going to like keep a public record of.
All right. Well, I know a lot of people are going to be looking to see how that kind of affects you. In terms of just general goals this year, do you have any goals set for yourself?
Win everything. Win a major tournament, I guess, would be the one goal that I'm really aiming for. I've never won a big tournament since the Koreans started participating in them. had a couple of Koreans, and Puma, I mean, obviously Puma's been one of the best performers at foreign tournaments, period. So to beat him 3-0 like that, that's definitely a really big accomplishment. I'm very happy with that. But I haven't won like an LG or an IPL or something with a stacked field of Codes Koreans in it. So I think that would be a nice feather in my cap.
One of the things that, and this kind of goes hand in hand with the goals, you've been very, very public about your dislike for the game. I think even directly saying, I hate this game, or this game is... did you say this game is shit? I'm trying to remember exactly.
I'm sure I have at some point. Every possible iteration of that phrase.
What
I have.
What makes you hate the game so bad?
I don't really like. I liked Starcraft 1 so much because it felt like a sport to me. It felt like if I played faster and executed better than my opponent, I had a really, really good chance at winning. And I really disliked the luck-based portions. Like my least favorite matchup by far was TVP, because there was a lot of strategical quirks to the early game. Someone could proxy Robo Reaver, or they could proxy DT, or they could 10-15 gate. There was lots of little annoying strategical things they could do to get a win, even if they weren't really superior to you, mechanically superior. Whereas TVZ was like an art form to me. TVZ was the best thing, because it was almost purely execution, and it was so difficult to do. But if you did it well, it was so amazing. And anyone who actually knew how hard it was, like, just watching Flash vs. Shadong or something, that's the best thing ever to watch if you're into legitimate RTS esports. But StarCraft 2, the mechanics aren't as difficult, so strategy becomes infinitely more important, just because you can't compensate for being behind on a build order or whatever by outplaying your opponent as much, because there's not as much to do to outplay them. And that, like I said, makes strategy much more important. However, it's a game of limited information. It's not like chess or anything. Chess, it's okay to be purely strategy because you can see everything that's going on, so everything comes down to your decision-making and you outsmarting your opponent. But here it's just like, well, shit, I didn't scout that. He took a really big risk early game. I had no way of knowing that it was happening. I didn't take a proper compensating risk. I'm kind of fucked now. And I just think that's terrible for competitive play. That alone would ruin the game for me. But then there's also things within the game that I find very boring, like the whole dynamic of CVP, especially late game. Infestor Broodlord versus Mothership. Balanced or not, like, balance completely aside. I've said this before. It's really, really boring. If Zerg sits there above their spine crawlers, spine's 4 wall, and is willing to be patient enough and tedious enough, then they should kind of win. Protoss can't really engage into that. But if Zerg does try to be aggressive and make anything happen within the game, then they're risking taking 1-2 vortexes and losing their entire army and then getting rolled. It creates for really, really boring games. And if both sides play ideally, like, it should be even more boring than it already is. Other things like that as well.
Do you think that Heart of the Swarm will have any chance of bringing you back into the game? Are you looking forward to kind of a reset somewhat?
Kind of. I'm not sure how well I'll deal with it. Wings of Liberty is the first time I went to a new game, and there a lot of my success was simply because I was a much better RTS player than a lot of the other people who switched over. I had that recent StarCraft 1 professional experience, and most other people who switched didn't. So that kind of gave me a really big leg up. My success wasn't hugely because I adapt to new games well. So I'm not sure how well I'll do at the beginning of Heart of the Storm. We'll see. I definitely look forward to new challenges and something new and interesting and exciting, and seeing if they'll be able to fix some of the problems. Because I know they've said they're taking out the Mothership, and I do feel that the Mothership Broodlord dynamic is like the worst thing about the game. However, without the Mothership, I have no idea how Protoss deals with Broodlord Infestor. So if that's, a step in the right direction. A few other problems they could fix. I really do like the Viper and the Swarm host conceptually, depending on how balance goes, depending on how they tweak them. I think they could be really good additions to the Zerg arsenal, could make the game a lot more dynamic and fun. So I have cautious hopes for the new expansion.
One of the Reddit guys, Acid LOL, was asking, you played Terran in Brood War. Are you considering changing race in Heart of the Swarm? Or at all, ever?
It crosses my mind once in a while, but I don't think it's really practical. I think it would just cost too much. It would take too long. Like, you see Flash saying he thinks it's going to take him at least 2 months to be competitive, and like 6 months to a year to really be high level. And that's Flash. He's like he's the only thing I would actually call an RTS prodigy, like a genius level talent within esports right now. And so if he thinks it would take him that, then even with the fundamental knowledge and mechanics I have from playing Zerg, it would take me a really long time to be good with Terran Protoss. and so that would cost me, professionally. I wouldn't be performing as well. That lets my team down, lets me down, and I also have to deal with all this shit about LOL. You said it was imbalanced. Why can't you win? That's pretty annoying. So no, I don't think it's really practical to switch at this point.
In a previous interview, I believe it was with Seltzer, I'm not sure where you can find it, so I'll try to post it in the comments for you guys, but you stated that you love talking about game design and balance. Is that something you could possibly see yourself doing as a job in the future, when kind of all said is done with your esports career?
I'm not sure if I'm really creative enough. I suppose I could do balance testing and post-design work, but for actually coming up with new, unique ideas to solutions, I'm not particularly good at that. I'm much more of an analytical. You give me a solution, then I look at it and I try and make it better, or try and compare two solutions and see what works better. Look at the game and see what's wrong with it, as opposed to actually designing a new game or anything like that. I don't think it really fits what I'm good at.
One of the other topics right now is, and I guess for me this is probably a lot of spotlight I've been putting on it, but the community is, you were one of the first people, community figure-wise, to get a lot of bad attention from them. Do you deal with it the same way that you did then now? And does it affect you at all? And how do you actually deal with it?
Every once in a while, you get kind of annoying just because it can be so stupid. Like, you see some ridiculous statements. And then you look at those and you're just like, really? Really? But no, for the most part, I have no. It doesn't really bother me. It never really has. I find it very easy to blow off. They're just people who like to be angry on the internet. No one ever comes up to me in real life and says, "Hey, you're a fucking douchebag." They're asking for autographs and signatures, telling me I'm awesome. They want to talk about strategy, and they're cool guys. So if all fan experiences were negative, then sure, that would bother me. It's just like, why am I involved with these people? But no, I really get the impression it's just a vocal minority of people who like to be angry on the internet. And that our actual community is not that bad. So I read it. I'm not like some of the people who have to just completely be detached from it in order to deal with it. I can read it, and I can just laugh at it. It doesn't bother me at all.
Yeah, yeah. In terms of people that get the shit out there from the community, is there... This is kind of a terrible thing to say, but are there any ones that deserve it in your eyes? Are there people that have a common theme about them that the community is always harping on that you see as a true one, or something that the specific person should address?
Well, I talked about Naniwa earlier on the show. He already has a lot of negative attention. I think is pretty well deserved. Day9's actually been catching quite a bit of flack recently for his persona and what he puts out to the public, and I think that deserves some scrutiny. I think he said some questionable things in the past. I'm not sure how fair what he presents to the public is. That's a really touchy subject because he is someone I know personally. Right. He's a good guy, and he's done a ton for esports. He's done a lot to better esports, and he's made the industry better for all of us. So, take that with a big grain of salt. But there are some things about him I don't particularly like. I don't know. I'm sure there are some, but no one really coming to mind.
Well, getting away from Reddit, basically, the Brood War players are coming over, and it's not really talking about them anymore. It's actually watching them play. Starcraft 2, we've seen them actually play in the Pro League a couple days ago. What were your thoughts about them? Obviously, it wasn't the highest caliber of play, but generally, you think you're going to be scared? Are you worried at all? What do you think about that?
I've only watched 4 or 5 of the games because, like you said, they're not very good. And I don't know. There's a couple who are pretty decent. That Motive guy, I believe he's Grandmaster. I've heard Effort's Grandmaster as well on Korea. So not terrible, but just not very high level. Not at all the same caliber as GSL players. I don't really feel like there's too much I can learn from them just yet, except for little quirks like you can tell they think differently. I think we were talking about it inside the game yesterday. Effort just made a couple of muted some random overseer controlling observers. So cute little tactics like that. And then watching the superstars, the J-Dongs, the Flash, the Efforts, just out of curiosity. These are the players I had a ton of respect for in Brood War. And so it's pretty cool to see them playing my game now. But on the whole, I don't really like it. The production value is pretty terrible. Like, it's in, 480p? 4x3?
Right, yeah.
It looks absolutely awful. If you're used to MLG or IPL broadcasts, even the GSL foreign broadcasts, much, much, much better quality. So that's kind of disappointing. and players aren't that good. It's just a curiosity right now. It's not really a legitimate competition.
Will we ever see, and this is just your own personal opinion, nothing to do with your affiliation with Evil Geniuses, but do you think that the big names, the Bisus, the Jadongs, the Flashes, the Storks, the Efforts, will ever leave those KESPA Pro Sanctions teams or have a deal, a partnership, if you will, with any foreign teams out there?
It's hard to say. I don't really think so. Those guys are absolute superstars over there. Flash, I think, has $1 million deal with KT. I think it's worth $1 million over 3 years or so. They have a really good thing going there. No foreign team, even EG. People talk about how deep our pockets are. We're not going to buy Flash for $1 million. So I'm not sure if it's practically going to happen. Also, most of those players, they're very patriotic. Like playing up on, you would see people talk about how they didn't want to go to WCG because it was a waste of time because they wanted to focus for OSL and whatnot. The Korean leagues are what they really care about. So assuming that the Korean Brood War fan base switches over pretty well, that those leagues still exist, I think they're mostly going to stay focused on that. And the other aspect of the equation is KESPA. KESPA is, they don't play nice with others. They have the deal with MLG now, and we'll see how far that goes. They realize that there's a big market to be tapped for the foreign fan base. We have a lot of people who watch a lot of Starcraft too, and that's valuable to them. So they're going to cooperate at least to some extent. But those KESPA contracts are really, really unfair to the players. It gives most of the power to the organizations, to the teams, and to KESPA. And I think they're going to control them pretty closely. They're not going to let one of their superstars get away to us.
All right. Well, that about sums up all the questions that I've got for you. I know there were a lot of questions out there from the community, but I really don't want to make this show too long and take too much of Greg's time. I guess lastly, is there anything just you want to get off your chest, anything that you want to say? And if not, go ahead and just do the sponsor shout-out.
Nothing. This was a really cool interview. I'd like to thank you for having me. More personal type interviews, they're pretty rare, and well done ones that aren't awkward and annoying are even rarer. So thank you for that. And then also thank you to my team, Evil Geniuses, our sponsors, Intel, SteelSeries, Monster, Kingston HyperX, Beyond Gaming, Sapphire. And you can follow me personally at EG.IdrA, IDRAJIT, on Twitter. And that will kind of link you to everything else about me. And thank you, everyone who watches this.
All right, well, that'll do it for this episode of Real Talk, guys. I'm not sure when we're going to be doing these regularly. They are going to be recorded straight to VOD productions for some time. We might be doing them live in the future, but not too sure when that'll happen. I still am quite busy. I can't even do State of the Game, for fuck's sake, on a weekly basis right now. So we'll see exactly when I decide, and I'll go ahead and update you guys as much as I can in the thread. Also on Twitter. Go and follow, actually, I forgot to mention this. I'm not sure if Greg did. IdrAjit, IDRAJIT, over at twitter.com. Let them know what you think, support them and all that stuff. And that'll do it for this episode. So, guys, we'll see you next time here for Real Talk. I'm JP McDaniel, and we are out.